Welcome everyone to the Payson Planning Commission for Wednesday, June 28th, 2023. I've asked Commissioner Brinkerhoff to give us the thought or invocation.
All right, this is from Harry S. Truman. He said, America was not built on fear. America was built on courage, on imagination, and unbeatable determination to do the job at hand. I just thought that was pretty much 4th of July.
Oh, I forgot to mention that we have 5 commissioners present. We're missing Commissioner Hamley and Christie. All right, number 3, the consent agenda from last week.
I was not in attendance on June 14th, so my name will need to be stricken from all the votes and posted as absent. With those corrections, now I'm not going to
Make a motion that with the previously stated provisions and corrections, we approve the minutes of last meeting's agenda.
I'll second that.
Second by Commissioner Brinker. All in favor?
Yes.
Any opposed? All right, we're on to number 4, public forum. This is a chance for public to talk to us about anything that is not on tonight's agenda. Online. Okay, we will move on to item 5.1, the public. Well, do we want to do them together, Robert, or separate?
I'm going to, let's do them separately,
Okay, we'll
but
start
can I make a recommendation?
to mention 5.3.
Maybe if you could request to take the agenda out of order, and then we could just table that one up front. So, and then, but I can add a little bit of explanation to that.
So we are going to do the agenda out of order. We'll start with 5.3, the public hearing for the general plan amendment for Spring Creek specific area plan.
Yeah, so just as a matter of interest to the Planning Commission, to any public, this was scheduled for a public hearing for the Spring Creek area plan. We've been working on this for a long time. And there are many people who have been contacted about this and who have attended over time, and we appreciate those members of the public who are here tonight. We, as staff, we just felt that this needs a little bit more time for comment and review. The time that we've had it to actually review the entire draft hasn't been that much. We've been getting a few comments back to me directly, and those comments I think are really important, and we want to give just ample time in order to do that. So our suggestion was to table this item tonight, and we will hold a public hearing at a later date. But if anyone that's viewing this or here have any questions or anything, they are more than welcome to contact me. My email address is robertm@payson.org, and that's the best way to get into contact with me.
How do we, I've never tabled something. How do we table it?
You call for a motion.
motion to table 5.3, general plan amendment, Spring Creek specific area plan. Second.
Second by Commissioner Warner. All in favor?
Yes.
Any opposed?
Perfect.
All right, now 5.1.
Perfect, thank you. So we appreciate the opportunity that we had a couple weeks ago to have kind of a work session with the council. So everything that we're going to be or a work session with the Planning Commission. So everything that we're going to be talking tonight kind of centers around that, but tonight you have the opportunity to make recommendations to the City Council. The first one that we're going to be talking about is an ordinance text amendment to Chapter 1334. Move this out of the way so you can see a little better. Which relates to home occupations. Staff had received some requests that we look at our home occupation ordinance and regulations and standards. And so staff has done that, just with the specific idea of looking at home occupations in accessory structures on the same site as the single family dwelling that's associated with the home occupation. This request would apply to all zones in which home occupations are permitted. And just for the benefit of the public and everybody, a home occupation is basically a business license that's granted to someone who's operating a business out of their home. In order to be qualified as a home occupation, has to be completely innocuous. Basically, the rule of thumb is you wouldn't know that your neighbor has a business in their house or somewhere like that. And nothing in these amendments would change kind of that intent. The requested changes to Chapter 1334 basically center around the area that would be allowed for a home occupation. Currently, the code says that it's limited to 500 square feet of your single-family dwelling, or 25%, whatever is lesser. Our recommendation is to just change that to 600 square feet across the board. And then probably the most pertinent part of this is to allow an accessory building to be used for the home occupation and for customers to come into that. So if somebody has like a small shop of woodworking or something like that that they're doing their crafts in, that customers could be allowed in there and actually kind of use that as like a showroom or something like that. That's currently not permitted in an accessory structure. And that's really the gist of this entire amendment, is to allow that. And then there's some non-substantive changes to verbiage and grammar. Whenever we go through ordinance amendments, we see things that need to be updated. These are just some of the findings. These were listed in the staff report, but I wanted to put them up here for the benefit of everybody. All decisions should be made on findings of facts. All recommendations should be made on findings of facts. So as we've reviewed this, this is consistent with our Payson City Code, allows for greater flexibility, which in a changing economy is probably a good thing. And then we would just anticipate that this would probably strengthen the viability of a home occupation if they're allowed to do this. This doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be operating a full-blown commercial business out of their home. We have zones that allow for that. And we also have regulations that come into play when we have, if there was ever an opportunity or an instance where a home occupation has gone beyond its accessory nature, then that's time for them to be informed that they need to move to a commercial area in our city. So with that, we just have our staff recommendation is to forward a positive recommendation to the City Council to adopt the proposed amendments related to home occupations based on these findings, staff report, and any other items that you want to discuss. And then I'm available for any questions.
Question.
Mm-hmm.
Where it was originally set up, or how, let me go back. So now this is to add accessory structures on the premises, okay, where primarily it was in the residence or home business type thing. So the only concern I have is if they're seeing customers or clients in, an accessory building, because accessory building is kind of broad, I don't know the requirements of the restroom facility, these type of things in an accessory building, if the public is going to be allowed to do business in such a place. So
right. So the regulations would be the same. So they would still be allowed to use the facilities of the single family home, which would accommodate for restrooms and things like that. Building code would still apply. and all of those regulations that dictate how many people can come to a home at one time, any additional like state licensing, things like that, those would all be still in place. This is basically the nuts and bolts of this is it's just allowing a person to have some of their operation in an accessory building.
As we reviewed this last week and looked over it, I quite like the idea. I think it'll help Payson City residents, give them the ability to get a little bit of a foothold and upward mobility in this economy with so much inflation. Those that do have, side hustles and businesses in their homes. I think those few bad actors that would take advantage of it already are anyway. And to regulate that is nearly impossible. So I think for most of Payson City, this will be a good thing. And I don't think it will blow completely out of proportion and cause problems because like you said, that the whole idea is if the neighbors don't really know there's a business going there, running there anyway, what's the difference if they store some lumber in an exterior shed, if there's a dog grooming business, if they wash the dogs somewhere else besides their home. And so I think it's a good move.
This is a public hearing. I don't know if we want to have that person at a staff or commission discussion afterwards.
Yep.
So some,
Move to open the public hearing on ordinance text amendment to title 13.34 Payson City Code.
Second.
everyone in agreement?
Yes.
Any opposed? So if you have any comments, you can come up to the microphone and state your name.
That's okay.
Teresa Hyatt. I just have a question. The parking. So depending on what kind of business it is, I could see like crafts and stuff like that. Are they gonna park in the people's driveways?
So same requirements have to apply.
How are we gonna make that? Like, make sure they do that? Because I know there are some businesses that get a lot of people around and they're around taking other people's parking places. I just want to make sure when this comes to us that that's
No,
already been thought about.
It's a great question. So I think it has to come under that idea of, to directly answer this question, has to come under that idea of, is it operating as a home that has an accessory business in it? Or is it a business where you happen to sleep once in a while, right? And so we have instances in our city where people have been granted a home occupation and it has blown up, right? And we are going through the enforcement process of that right now. And that is at the mercy of the justice system. So,
But they are working on it.
oh yeah, absolutely.
And so is there a way you can put that in the amendment when they come in to get that license that, okay, this is what you're allowed as parking? Like, is that in that so that they know they can't have 20 cars there at night doing some kind of a show or something?
Yeah, so the ordinance regulates parking for if they have an employee or something like that. And then it relies on the parking standards of the single family detached residential zone.
And that's,
That's the part.
that will be made aware to them
Oh,
when
yeah,
they do this.
we can do
Okay,
that. We can do that.
that's all I need to know.
That's good.
Seeing there's no other public comment, does anyone want to make a motion?
Motion to close public hearing.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Warner. In approval?
Yes.
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 Any opposed? Okay, so we can have more discussion if you want. Your comment.
Sorry, I skipped ahead of line.
No, with, my only comment to that would be, under the enforcement of ordinances, because, we can have everything and anything we want on the books, but it still comes down to enforcement. And like you said, that just opens one more crack in the system there. But like Commissioner Rowley said, we already got the bad apples already out doing it under the guise of nothing's going on here, you know, so.
Right.
Perhaps as kind of a comment to send on to the city council, we might suggest that if they do not feel there is a sufficient amount of money that's available for prosecuting violators, that maybe ought to consider adding some budget to that area so that enforcement can be increased beyond what it is now. I'm not sure what the budget is, but that might be something to think about.
I guess question, is there somebody within the city employment here that is over the watchdog of the ordinances, you know?
Yes. So code enforcement in Payson City is handled by the police department in collaboration with building inspectors and development services and public works and things like that. But the actual enforcement is done by the police department. So they're the ones that actually go to the home and notify of violations and issue those violations and things like that, which just anecdotally is the best way to do it. I've worked for cities where there are specific code enforcement officers in other departments. And there's a significant difference of somebody showing up in a polo and khaki pants saying you can't do what you're doing, and a police officer with a badge and a gun showing up saying you can't do what you're doing.
Well, with the enforcement side of the ordinances, I think the short and the long side of that is usually it has to come from a complaint. You know,
Most
because
often.
there's nobody really out and about looking for ordinance violations like they do for traffic violations, you know, so.
The neighbors will be those ones making the complaint.
Yeah.
I think when a business did get out of control, like, at least I know my neighbors, they'd be quick to complain.
Yeah, and I think there's been actually cases of both, you know, when there are blatant violations to zoning code or things like that. Our inspectors are out and they take note of that and they pass that information on, and we document that and pass that information on. But the bulk of enforcement is complaint driven. And this is kind of one of those situations where most of the time you don't even know if your neighbor's in violation. If it's not bothering you, you don't really complain about it. It's only until it becomes a problem, like you have a situation where, you know, the entire street is being taken up by one person's trucking company or something like that, then it becomes problematic.
I think where I was leaning on this was not in terms of citing the violator, but after the citation is issued, then there are court expenses, there are investigative expenses, there are a number of things that cost the city some resources to be able to carry out the enforcement. And that's what I would just suggest the city council make sure they've got enough resource there to be able to take care of it.
I think that's a very wise introspective comment.
And to side with Teresa Hyde, who made the public comment, I would hope that when people apply for such applications and licenses, that those issuing those permits and applications would point them to find the rules and regs on what can be done and what can't, just educate them so we can avoid the expense and the citations. I think too often we just throw them the keys, they can't even tell them figure it out. And we would hope with something like this that employees and staff would educate and become familiar with those rules and regs and pass those on to the public.
Very good discussion. Does anyone want to make a motion?
I make a motion that we recommended the city council approval of the text amendment, to text amendment to Title 13.34 of the Payson City Code relating to home occupations, and recommend that we approve these changes, including the ability to use an accessory unit as part of that business.
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Warner. All approve? Yes?
Yes.
Any-
Yes.
Sorry, any opposed? All right. Let's move on to 5.2, ordinance text amendment to chapter 13 of Payson City Code to provide water efficiency standards for landscaping and to amend landscaping requirements.
Okay. Let me share something else really quick. This ordinance text amendment is the direct result of some updated water efficiency standards that were released by Central Utah Water Conservancy District last fall. Just in an effort to combat the drought and things like that, Central Utah Water issued these efficiency standards that have different applicability, definitions, and then requirements, and for landscaping specifically. And so this is the basis of what we're going to be talking about tonight. And then let me just quickly go to what the proposed amendments are. There we go. So this is staff initiated at the request of, basically that letter went out to all municipalities within Central Utah Water's purview, requesting these changes to provide for more efficient landscaping. And then they also provide recommendations and design considerations. This is applicable to all zones in the city with landscaping requirements. And those, all of those zones have been noted, and those specific changes have been put into your packet. Just one second. So basically what this boils down to is we are creating a new chapter within Title 13. This is chapter 1321. This is where all the details of their specific requirements, recommendations, and design considerations will be held. And then we are updating all of the other sections that relate to landscaping to make sure that they comply with this chapter. And then again, just non-substantive changes that make the chapter better. As staff has reviewed this, these are just some findings that we've found. The state does experience severe drought and have for several years. This last winter has been a blessing in that, but we're still in a drought. Landscaping can have excessive water needs, and that can have a strain on city resources. These specific landscaping requirements will apply to all new residential, commercial, and industrial projects within the city, and will provide an opportunity for residents to participate in what is called the Flip the Strip program. So essentially, it's Central Utah Water is offering a trade-off. If a city is willing to adopt these new requirements that apply to all new construction, then existing residences can get a rebate if they choose to flip their strip. These amendments are consistent with the desires of our code, but I also wanted to have a consideration or have a discussion about some considerations and really what these specific landscaping requirements are asking. So up there on the screen, these are the specific requirements that have to be adopted in order for our residents to qualify for this program. We have received calls about this, and because people have been contacting Central Utah, asking about this program, and the response has been, well, the city of Payson doesn't yet participate in this program. That's one part of this. The other part of this is the long-reaching aspect of these proposed amendments. So first of all, lawn, which is any turf or grass, that's specifically defined, cannot be less than 8 feet wide at its narrowest point. So essentially that eliminates grass from park strips, period. It also cannot exceed 35% of the total landscaped area, and then it's further defined there. Let me provide a little bit of background. In Payson, when a new home is constructed, we require that front yard landscaping be completed, as well as the front side yards be completed. We do not require the rear yard to be completed in order to receive a certificate of occupancy. So this requirement of not exceeding 35% of lawn would only apply to the front yard. Somebody could still, from property line to property line in the rear yard, sod that, put grass seed in, whatever. Then it goes on specifically to say that it cannot be, lawn cannot be in park strips, paths, or slopes greater than 25%. I was informed by the engineer today that that is because a slope greater than that, the lawnmower tips over. Leave it to them to be logical. And then in commercial, industrial, institutional, and multifamily development, common area landscapes, lawns can't exceed 20% of the total landscaped area outside of what is considered active recreation areas. So we can still have lawns in parks. We can still have large activity areas that are grass. Those would just be designated as active recreation areas, and then these rules do not apply. But if the landscaping is strictly for landscaping, ground cover, and ornamental reasons, then you can't have more than 35% in your front yard, and you can't have more than 20% in those other areas. A new change that these proposed amendments would require is that a landscaping plan would have to be submitted with every single-family detached home that is constructed. The reason for that is that we would, as staff, we would now have to review and establish that those percentages have been met. So we would be now looking specifically at front yards, whereas beforehand, we didn't require that. We just required landscaping and allowed the homeowner to choose that themselves. So that will require additional time and resource on staff's behalf. This next part is really, really important. Flip Your Strip is a rebate program, not a reimbursement program. So it's important to understand that the cost of flipping the strip is not going to be completely remediated in the rebate that you receive from Central Utah Water. Currently, the amount that a person can receive for flipping their strip is $1.25 per square foot. We, as staff, we've been looking at this, even for city projects and things like that. And are there ways that we could experiment with this and provide demonstration areas and things like that? We received a quote from a landscaping company on what a typical park strip would cost to implement this type of stuff. It's about $7 a square foot. Okay, so people will be getting something back, obviously. I think that sometimes there's the misconception that it's going to completely cover the cost and that we just want to clarify rebate, not reimbursement. This other point is really important, that water efficient landscaping does not equate to maintenance free landscaping. The wind blows a lot. It blows seeds and dirt and all sorts of stuff in there, and you still have to pull the weeds. Unfortunately, it is just one of life's terrible realities. And then just like with anything else, as we're thinking about how we can improve, I think education should probably be one of the main components of anything that's attached to amendments and programs and things like that. Educating people on why conserving water is a good idea is very, very important, just as important as changing, quote unquote, the law to require something. So those are just some considerations that we wanted to make sure that you were aware of. In spite of all of that, the staff has reviewed this, and there's probably some really good reasons to move forward with this, even as an experimental phase. I mean, there's nothing keeping us from, in a few years, changing this ordinance if we find that it's not working to what we want it to be. But our staff recommendation is to forward a positive recommendation. But I'm available for any questions. If after your discussion, after the public hearing, the planning commission has different thoughts on that, wants to do a different recommendation, by no means are you offending me at all. Just please consider that you would need to provide findings for those additional, for any other recommendation. So that's all I have. Any questions?
Robert, does this apply strictly to residential or is it business as well?
Business as well, for new construction.
For new construction? Okay,
This does not apply retroactively.
right.
This is not a mandate to go change out your landscaping. This is just a new regulation moving forward.
Thank you.
Good question.
For the rebate to be in effect for our city, do we have to follow their suggestions to the letter?
We have to follow specifically their requirements. So these specific requirements have to be part of our ordinance. Recommendations are just recommendations, but requirements are what they're really interested in.
And these are requirements.
These are requirements.
I move that we open public hearing.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Wonder. All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
And Mrs. Rivas? So if the public would like to talk to us about this, you can come up to the microphone and state your name. Or anyone online? Robert?
No.
Motion to close public hearing.
A motion?
Second.
We could say Commissioner Rowley seconded that. All in favor?
Yes.
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 Opposed? Okay. Session. In our work session, we talked about this quite a lot. One concern I think we brought up was between, now that we're allowing smaller spaces between some developments, that it would need no grass between poles. That's one of the things, which for me would be a little bit of a concern.
I like the idea of it, but I guess a few concerns that I have with people moving, and I agree, parking strips are a complete waste of water, absolutely. But we're talking about, not to be less than 8 feet wide at its narrowest point, that's a big park strip, if that's a park strip. And I know it's not, that's someone's yard. And like was previously stated, we've got houses close together, buildings closer together. Got people maybe putting in rocks instead of that, and then that would require the use of more herbicide, like Roundup and the weed spray to get that under control. And I just feel that as a city, we should be very careful about limiting residents or Payson City and the ability to have a say what our developments look like. I feel like that power is slowly slipping away, and I'd hate to give up some more of that just to have a small rebate for the citizens, at one time, couple $100 at best rebate. And so really the concern to me too is limiting the residents' ability to say what their front yard looks like. And then also more on your guys' shoulders as we have to regulate, review those plans, look at them, do the math on every single plan that comes through, make sure it doesn't, meets the requirements of 35%. And so those are my concerns right now.
I think I would second what your concerns are. I feel the same way. I do recognize that we want to do something in this area, but I think these ordinances are too restrictive. I just would like to go too far.
I think we should always educate rather than regulate. And I think the money that we would spend having people look at these plans could be put better to use on just encouraging and educating people on what's the best use of that space water-wise. And I would love to see some city ordinances that are like this for businesses. Absolutely. Why does the post office or some of these other businesses, if there were new ones to be built, need a yard, they wouldn't. And so I'd love to see Payson City take this idea and apply it to businesses, but I don't like the idea of it as in residential.
I would agree with these two commissioners' statements. Slowly, the state legislature is taking away this body's ability to do much. Now we have these things coming down the pike, and it's not that I don't disagree that yes, we're in a drought and we need to figure out a way to slow the flow, as the statement goes. But I don't know. It seems like every outside body wants to kind of dictate what every city does. So I'm kind of in agreement with these guys.
Can I ask a clarifying question? So just so I understand, the commission is okay with not having grass in a park strip. It's just when it includes a front yard that becomes problematic in the amount of limitation that you would consider. Is that correct? Is that a correct assessment?
Speaking for myself, I recognize that park strips are problematic in terms of keeping them watered, keeping them weeded, and those issues. But I hate to dictate to somebody who's clever in the way that they plan a yard to tell them there's no way you can have any turf out there, because they may have an idea that for their location and their situation makes some sense or could be quite attractive. So it's hard for me. I'm not sure how you would write an ordinance to give them flexibility and yet limit them. I'm not sure how you do that. That's a tough thing, but it grates on me a little bit that we would be so restricted that there would be no way that they could do something special if they felt like they had an idea. Maybe we write an ordinance that provides an exception under certain circumstances and gives them a loophole to work through. But to just completely ban it and say nowhere, in no case, that's a little further than I think I want to go.
Okay. Sometimes ordinance writing is half technical writing and half fiction, right? Like you're trying to come up with the next Harry Potter. And so maybe I'm going to push you a little bit, Blair. So maybe a trade-off situation, like you can have grass in the park strip if you have come up with a way that it's shaded more often, so you don't have to have as much water type thing. To allow them that type of ingenuity and prospect to say, if you can prove to us that that's good.
We even talked about a drip system or something in the park strip.
The irrigation, like better irrigation and not.
Well,
water.
so many of the things that I see, having a yard, a park strip, like I said, okay, we're gonna go grassless out here. We're gonna put a rock in, okay? Man, that first 6 months, that rock's in there, man, it looks great till all the dirt blows in and all the wind and the seeds blow in, and pretty soon there's trees and weeds and everything else coming out of them, and then it becomes still a maintenance headache, and just like Commissioner Rowley said, now the shortcut is I go buy Roundup, I go buy ground clear, I go buy something I put down, which we all know that ends up in the ground and in the groundwater, and so now we're taking care of one problem and creating another problem.
I don't like the idea of thinking about reducing water usage. And that's where I think the trade-offs, and you mentioned shade. I'm sure there's probably other ways to do that too. If we could find a way to state that we're interested in reducing the amount of water it takes to maintain without being so prescriptive on exactly what you can and can't have there. I feel like that's a better ordinance if we can find words for it.
That thankfully we have one member of the city council here tonight, but that's kind of the message that I would probably take to them, that planning commission seems to be on board with the idea of water conservation. The strict regulation of this gives you a lot of pause. Okay.
I agree with that statement.
Okay.
Also talking about the rocks, like if we could add into the code, like if you put rock in, you need to maintain it. Like with the, and I say that and I have weeds in my rocks.
Yeah, I think it's tricky. Again, we gotta be careful what we prescribe, what we regulate, and that'd be tricky. And I could say if it's shaded, well, my truck's parked there, shading the yard, right? So, yeah, I don't know.
We gotta watch this guy.
Using that for the trucking company.
No, but to your point, that's absolutely right. We have an ordinance already that talks about the way that landscaping should be maintained. We don't require better homes and gardens, but we require, a mow once a summer type of thing to reduce the number of weeds and things like that. So the level of
You haven't been to my neighborhood.
yeah. And then again, it comes down to enforcement, right? Because every time we write an ordinance and adopt an ordinance, it's just paper until it gets enforced.
I would like to see something like this applied to new businesses, like I said before, but not to residential. I think we need to give some space, some grass for kids to play and everything else for Payson City. And I think it's more appealing as well from the curb.
I mean, just as a comment, not as a motion, I would rather not move this on with a positive recommendation, just because I'm a long way from being there. I think this needs some discussion. Either remand it back or table it for further discussion.
You'd rather remand it than suggest it or recommend it.
Denial.
Can I make a recommendation on that? I know that the city council is anxious to hear this. So maybe the instruction would be, well, you can make your own motion, but I'll just say that I know that the city council is anxious to see this. So if you have concerns about it, I would forward, I would just make the suggestion to forward a recommendation to deny. And then we'll list your concerns and things like that.
And with the Utah Water Central Conservancy District, I mean, that is the plan. There's no adjusting that. We either adopt it or we don't.
That's correct.
And so we can't discuss our way out of their plan. What we'd have to do is deny this and maybe come up with something different if we feel there's a need.
And then direct staff to say, okay, we like the idea of water conservation. Come back to us with a separate ordinance that addresses the concerns that we've been talking about.
But that would not allow citizens to get the rebate, though. I just want
That's
to make that
correct.
clear.
That is absolutely correct.
I make a motion that we recommend denial to the city council of the ordinance text amendment, chapter 13 of the Payson City Code to provide water efficiency standards for landscaping per Utah Central Conservancy Water Conservancy District rules. Recommend that due to the limiting nature of them, the landscaping headache it would be, and then the headache it would be for staff and the expense it'd be to staff to regulate this plan for a small amount of money, one-time small amount of money to citizens. It's just not worth it.
Second by Commissioner Brinkerhoff. All in agreement?
Yes.
Opposed? Okay,
And I think your statement about our being interested in water conservation and that, I think that's accurate. This isn't the tool to do it with, but I think we're interested.
Okay,
do you know when this is going to city council?
next week.
Okay, maybe one of us or a few of us could go and give our 2 cents.
I think that would be wonderful. Same time, same place, different time, 6 o'clock next Wednesday,
Would it be 6:30 by the time we get to that?
possibly.
So sorry. All right, since we already tabled 5.3, we're on to number 6, any commission reports, staff reports, training?
I don't have anything specific for you, other than to say, the state APA planning conference will be held in September. If any of you would like to attend that, please let me know and we can provide some registration for you likely. It's a really good opportunity. They encourage planning commission members to attend that just to learn a little bit more about different ordinances and regulations and kind of responsibilities that you have. If you're interested at all, just let me know and I can give you some more information and we can get you signed up if you'd like to go.
Tell me more. Is that a 1 day, is it a 2 day?
That's up to you. Generally, it's Thursday, Friday, and Saturday.
It's usually an afternoon Wednesday to up till lunchtime Friday. But they tend to have a focus for planning commissioners and elected officials on one of those days.
Yeah.
Okay, and where's it being held?
This time it's going to be in Ogden.
One last motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Warner, all in favor?
Yes.
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 Thank you.
Thank you all.